Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Kristin Harmel.
I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
And this is Friends and Fiction, 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support indie bookstores, authors, and librarians.
And if you're not already with us, we hope you will join our Facebook group, which is more than 270,000 members strong. We would also like to invite you to follow us on Instagram and YouTube and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which we will talk about later in the show because it is full of interviews and secret things and launch information and tons of bonus content. So you can find out more about all of those things and our incredible Friends and Fiction community at Friends and Fiction, spell out the word and, friendsandfiction.com.
Now, tonight we are so excited to welcome Meg Waite Clayton to discuss her new novel, Typewriter Beach, which was just released on July 1st. So let's give you a little bit of background on Meg.
So Meg is the New York Times and international best-selling author of 9 novels, including The Postmistress of Paris, The Last Train to London, The Wednesday Sisters, and Beautiful Exiles. Her books have been finalists for the Barbara Kingsolver's Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction, the Langham Prize, and the National Jewish Book Award, and they have been published in 24 languages. Her screenplay for The Last Train to London was chosen for the prestigious Meryl Streep and Nicole Kidman-sponsored The Writers' Lab.
Well, I'm excited to talk to her about that. We're going to be chatting a little bit about screenwriting tonight. So Meg has written more than 100 shorter pieces for the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Runner's World, and Public Radio. She mentors for the Op-Ed Project and is a member of the National Book Critics Circle, PEN, the Authors Guild, and the California Bar. She's a proud graduate of the University of Michigan and Michigan Law School, and she divides her time between California and Connecticut.
Her new novel, Typewriter Beach, was just released on July 1st and is an unforgettable story of the unlikely friendship between an Oscar-nominated screenwriter and a young actress hoping, fingers crossed, to be Alfred Hitchcock's new star.
Sean, can you bring Meg on?
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Meg.
Hey, Kristin. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're so happy you're here. Welcome to Friends and Fiction. So, Typewriter Beach is the story of Isabella Giori, an actress in the 1950s, who's sequestered in a cottage in Carmel, California, beside a mysterious screenwriter named Leon Chazen.
I say Chazen.
Chazen. Sorry, we talked about this backstage, and I'm like, I know I'm going to mess it up. Leon Chazen. It's also the story of Chazen's granddaughter, Gemma, 6 decades later, who arrives to clean out her beloved grandfather's cottage after his death and stumbles upon a safe full of secrets and a neighbor with a backstory of his own. That's a bit about what Typewriter Beach is about, but can you tell us a little bit more? And then one of our favorite questions here on Friends and Fiction, what is the book really about?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Let me start with a little background that is a little bit what the book is really about before I go into a little more detail about the plot, I guess. I first put pen to page for Typewriter Beach in my weekly virtual writing group were called the Gems. It's Jen, Ellie, Meg, and
Oh.
Cheryl, which is a Friday group, or was a Friday group at the time. It was February 11th of what was a total crap year, to be honest. It was 8 months after my dad died and 3 weeks before I lost my mom. And by the end of the year, I'd have rearranged the promotion for the paperback of The Postmistress of Paris in order to live in isolation in a friend's guest house while my husband Mac was treated for a cancer recurrence. He's well now. Yay! I know what that is. But anyway, I'd stalled on a new novel. And to be honest, my writing that winter, except for that hour with friends, was mostly as executor of my dad's estate. So Leo, a blacklisted writer, has dad's middle name. He kind of splashed onto my page and offered me a glass of dad's scotch. It was 10 a.m., but hey, it was a fictional drink, and never mind that I hate scotch, I downed it.
Oh, that's so.
Gemma, that's my name backwards. Her legs are my mom's, as is the typewriter Leo was sitting at. So Typewriter Beach isn't our story, but it definitely comes from the shreds of my heart and contains, as one reviewer has said, numerous lovely portrayals of people finding love and family even when they've given up hope of it happening for them in an unkind world. So that's kind of really what the book is about. It came out of my grief really at losing my dad and then my mom. But it turned into something entirely different. I sat down to write a story about a screenwriter on the blacklist, and that is at its heart what it is. My dad was not a blacklisted writer. He was a tech executive. So in that regard, he has very little to do with Leo. But the story is basically in 1957, Isabella's 10 months into a standard 7-year movie contract when she auditions with Hitchcock for what she hopes will be her breakout role. She's really desperate to get the part and then to convince her studio to loan her out for it. But then just weeks later, this fixer, the studio's fixer, sequesters her in this tiny Carmel cottage. And you'll have to read to see what she's there for. Leo is in the cottage next door. He's the screenwriter known simply as Chazen. And he's annoyed as hell when Iz opens, shows up at his door, interrupting his writing. And she's as annoyed as hell too, because he's woken her up at 5 a.m. with banging on his typewriter. But soon they're together in his roadster, speeding down the fog-shrouded Big Sur coast to a hidden beach. He's there. He tells her about Hitchcock's Rebecca being filmed there, which it really was, in a way that leaves her very uneasy. She's alone with him. Nobody knows she's there except the studio head and the fixer. And if she's found dead on that beach, they won't even admit to having sent her up to Carmel. So that's how the story, 1957 story opens. And then the 2018 story is 60 years later when Gemma, Leo's granddaughter, comes to clean out and sell his cottage, his Carmel cottage. She's 26 and her career has hit a bump even before really getting started. And she's really been recently been dumped by a bad boyfriend. And then in Leo's closet, she finds a hidden safe with secrets, including a screenplay that kind of rocks her already rocky world.
Like if everybody didn't just go out and grab that book. All right. So I've heard of Hollywood's blacklist and how it destroyed careers, but I knew very little about it. I remember when I was writing Mrs. Lewis, she went out there during that time. And so people needed screenwriters because people had been blacklisted. I want to know how you found out about it and why you decided to make it kind of a V in the road during this novel. Like what was the spark behind that?
Yeah. I'm a historian by training, by education anyway. And the blacklist and the McCarthy era are something that I learned about in college many, many years ago. And it's always fascinated me because I think of the United States as a free country where government doesn't impinge on our personal liberties. And yet this was a time when a congressional committee, starting in 1938, started silencing voices. It really hit its stride in the late 40s and 50s, when what was called HUAC took over, kind of by storm, took the country and made people bend to their will or lose their jobs. They terrorized Hollywood so that Hollywood executives made people sign loyalty oaths and rat out friends in order to be able to keep working in Hollywood. And that seemed really scary to me. It seemed really scary to me, and like something that we should never have repeated. And so that's where it got me. When before the blacklist started, there were over 500 writers writing under contract in Hollywood, and by the time it ended, there were something like 55. It really decimated.
Wow.
It really decimated the people who were writing in Hollywood. People still wrote in Hollywood, but they wrote, as Leo does, under pseudonyms and using fronts in order to sell their scripts. So it just really destroyed people's lives. And, it's those times of stress that show people at their best and their worst. And that's what I like to explore in my fiction. So that's how I came to this one.
Oh, that's awesome.
I want to ask one more question about the blacklist. So people would turn other people in, right?
Yes.
And they would turn them in suspecting them as communists, right? Or was it that they were suspected of just not agreeing with the government? Or what did it mean to be on the blacklist?
Well, so, I mean, the excuse for the blacklist was communism. And, you have to say the Soviets just detonated a bomb and, China just fell to the communists. And so there was a lot of fear in American society. That having been said, the presumption was that every single communist was a spy working for the Soviets, or that was the way that the committee presented it. And so, and because of the terror, people would say whatever they needed to say in order to get themselves off the hook. And so if you had ever, attended the wrong meeting.
Because a lot of people just went to meetings to be curious.
Exactly.
And then they'd get turned in.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And there was it was, people would turn in people they didn't know because that was better than turning in their friends. Or, some people who had already been named would say, okay, to their friends, okay, go ahead and name me. I can't be hurt worse. And that will give you somebody to name. But it really was first the HUAC, the committee. And then, of course, when the Wisconsin Senator McCarthy got involved, it amplified everything because he was making his own political career out of other people's pain.
Wow.
It's interesting because the blacklist was something I was a little bit familiar with, but which I really felt like I learned a lot more about through the pages of this novel, which I love that. I love books like that take us back to the past, but teach us something too. And it also struck me as I was reading it, and I know, Meg, you and I have both written about World War II, and you have a World War II connection in this book,
yes.
Which is interesting to me because the setting of the book feels very, very post World War II. I mean, it really is. The 1950s were a completely different world than the world we're writing about when we write World War II. But it really wasn't that much earlier. I mean, it is very logical to assume that everybody in your story had some sort of a connection or some feelings about what happened during World War II. And Leo specifically has a backstory that was very shaped by that. Can you talk a little bit about making that part of his backstory?
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to make clear is, as in so many bits of history, it's more complicated even than you imagine. So we say silencing communist voices, but the fact is that many of those voices were immigrant Jewish voices. And so that I wanted to make that clear. What happened with a lot of writers who fled Nazi Germany and or France or any Nazi occupied country was they came to America, and the place they could make a living was in Hollywood. So they came to Hollywood. There was a whole pipeline of people coming to Hollywood. And it was those refugees and those immigrants who were largely persecuted during the blacklist. And was it because they were, they were communists, because in France, the resistance was communist, and they were not Soviet, but that's the presumption that was overlaid just out of politicians trying to make the world simpler than it actually was.
Oh, such a good point. So fascinating when different pieces of history overlay themselves on top of each other and create this kind of cauldron of story for you. But I want to talk a little bit about Iz. So she is auditioning for Hitchcock, which is so great. I can just picture him right now. He's just such an iconic figure. You say his name and you can see him in your mind's eye. Anyway, Iz came so alive, and you peppered her world with so many real people from the era. In fact, she felt so real, it felt as if I might be able to Google and find her story. But of course, she's not real. So what inspired her character, and how did you go about crafting her life? Was she based at all on a real actress?
Yeah, well, so I have been fascinated with the position of and treatment of women in Hollywood for a long time. I've been for, I guess, almost 15 years now, writing pieces for the LA Times about women directors in particular, but women in general in Hollywood not getting the respect that they deserve. And so I was curious how far that went back. And of course, I'm a huge 1950s movie buff. My mom and I, we didn't connect on a lot of things, but one of the things we did connect on was watching old Hitchcock films. So she kind of came out of a mix of all of that. I wanted to explore, all my novels have at some piece of their core, this idea of how we women make our way in the world and the particular obstacles we face. So it was kind of a mix of that. It's is not based on any particular movie star, but I did gobble up a million biographies of various movie stars as an excuse, using this book as an excuse to do that, to spend my afternoons reading and calling it work. Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly is certainly a big inspiration. It's who Iz wants to be, and she happens to be my own favorite movie star of that era, along with Katharine Hepburn and Audrey Hepburn, also who I read biographies of. So it was a lot of that.
That's amazing.
That's awesome. How about Chazen? How about Leo Chazen? Did he have inspiration in a real screenwriter of the time?
Again, I read a lot about the blacklist and blacklisted screenwriters. I listened to a number of interviews with people who were on the blacklist. There's some just really terrific sources that I list in the back of the book where people can learn more. But I will tell you that Leo is at his heart my father. And everything about him, his big heart and his love and his just the way he is in the world with people. That's my dad.
Sweet.
So,
that's incredible.
Oh, wow. I love when there's a beating heart behind a character like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always a balance when you write about fictional characters inhabiting a world populated by very real and actual people, like Hitchcock, who has a few scenes in this book, and the notorious studio fixer, Eddie Mannix. I'd love for you to talk to us about the real characters in this book and the research you did to make them come alive.
Oh yeah, well, thank you. It's great fun for me to explore real characters. Some of my novels have been based on real characters.
Yeah.
As I know you guys draw from real characters as well. It's a nice little starting point because you have all this great information to start with. So Hitchcock, for example, obviously he's real, and he's very. I'm sure there are people who don't, young people who don't know who Hitchcock was, but he's pretty well known. And when you say Hitchcock, you imagine, his profile and
Yeah, so that's how
his,
you see him immediately.
his
Yeah.
physicality is just amazing. And then his movies, which are so memorable. But if you just give that, then you don't give the reader anything they don't know. And so one of the things I did was I read and listened to and watched, just absorbed everything I could about Hitchcock, even though I've been a Hitchcock fanatic for, a million years and already knew a lot about him. And you discover things like just his relationship with his wife, who was very involved in all of his movies, and the way
I didn't
they.
know that till that. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either, even though I knew a lot about him. So, and there's a point in the book where they say to each other, well, it's only a movie. And that is something that they said to each other all the time, even though obviously movies were their entire life. So, yeah, so everything, I hope that everything, I mean, at some point in time, obviously you jump off to fictionalize scenes. But I try to make the real people in my novels as true to who they really were as I understand them to be. So, for example, the description of Hitchcock's home for the scene in their home is from a real home that they had in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and
wow.
the opening scene. I will not say too much about because I want the reader to read it fresh, but I will say that Hitchcock liked steaks, and he did not eat just one at a time. Let's just leave it at that.
Maybe that's why he had that profile.
Yeah, it certainly was why he had that profile.
Maybe his silhouette
Yeah.
had something to do with his.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then Eddie Mannix, you imagine that there really were fixers in Hollywood at the time. You've kind of heard about them, but it turns out that they were very real, and they did a lot of good for people and a lot of not so good for people working in Hollywood. So they would rescue movie stars from their benders, or if a gay actor was found in the wrong place, they would go pay off people so that it wasn't talked about. But he was really, Eddie Mannix. There were some bad things about him, some of which are explored in the book, and so there are two sides to that. Yeah.
Yeah, you really sent me down the research rabbit hole with that one. And I had heard of Eddie Mannix in the past, but I had completely forgotten that his wife had an affair with George Reeves, and there was some suspicion that he might have had something to do with his death. It was so interesting to go back down that rabbit hole. Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing about putting real people in your book, because I think it does really, really bring that world alive for any of us who have any idea of sort of what happened in that in that era.
Yeah.
Which was really cool. So, Meg, you mentioned earlier, and I know you mentioned it in your author's note too, that you first put words on the page for this book 8 months after your dad had died and just a month before your mom did. So, first of all, we are so sorry that you lost both of them in a year. We're heartbroken for you. We're so sorry for that loss. And I think I had forgotten that you were going
on
through
the
that.
heels too. It's terrible.
What's that?
So quick on the heels. It's terrible.
So quick on the heels. And I think I had forgotten, Meg, that you were going through that at the same time that Mac was going through his health crisis and everything. So you really, I mean, what a terrible year for you. But I feel like sometimes from the darkest periods in our personal lives come the most beautiful fiction. And, as I was reading this book, I couldn't help but notice how real the depictions of grief mixed with everyday joy were. In fact, I emailed you afterwards and told you that you had made me cry 3 times on a plane, which is always embarrassing because everyone's looking at you like you're a lunatic. But I will say that each of those tears were triggered by small moments in the book where grief kind of crept up on the characters. So you say in your author's note, there are shreds of my heart all over this one. Can you talk a little bit about giving your characters some of the grief you must have been going through yourself, and how perhaps that brought these characters even more alive?
Yeah. I'll tell you that when I started this book, I'd been working for a while on a novel that my editor had already offered me a lot of money to write. For complicated reasons, I decided I didn't want to do it under a contract, but I meant to do that book for her. And then after my dad passed away, I couldn't get words on the page. And part of it was that I was the executor of his estate, and that's very time consuming. And it was a very messy and complicated estate. But mostly it was my grief. And so finally I just kind of sat down with my friends who I write with once a week. And I said, I think I'm going to start something new. I think I'm just going to set that one aside and start something new. I'm going to work on this novel about the blacklist that I've been thinking about doing for a while. And so what we do is we turn off our cameras and we write together for a little while, and then we can come back on and just talk. And so what I wrote there was what is like the opening Gemma chapter, which is Leo. He is a blacklisted writer, but it's really all about Gemma's grief, that opening chapter. And it just poured out of me. That grief just poured out of me in a way that I saw it had been bottled up for a long time. My mom was at the time not expected to live a long time. And so I always wanted to be positive with her. And so everything that was grief was inside of me. And it was really liberating to write about it. I mean, I think we're writers, and we so much of the way we deal with the world is through our writing. And so that's the way it came up. So the little things, the little things that probably made you cry were probably little things that I did with, like with my dad's toothbrush, for example, let's say. But they also helped me through my grief. Writing helps us through hard times. And so they helped me deal with what I was feeling, and helped me. I mean, sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling until I sit down and write about it.
Oh, yes. Of course.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But and then you take those personal things and it's like Hemingway says, you cut a vein and you just bleed on the page. Yep. And that's what makes the best literature. So I think in that way, in some ways, this is perhaps my best book because it comes from that deep grief, that it was very real. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's that feeling, I think, of putting ourselves back together again without even realizing we're doing it, Yeah.
And yet, it's interesting because it's not a dark book. Gemma goes through her grief, but it is a positive book. Despite the blacklist, despite Gemma's grief, it's about people falling in love, people finding family where it doesn't exist. It has, I hope, an ending that leaves people, laughing and crying at the same time, and it's, I hope, uplifting at a time when Lord knows we all need uplifting books. So
yes, we do.
Absolutely. Yep.
Speaking of uplifting and love, Carmel by the Sea.
Oh,
I know you love it because we can tell in your prose, but I have never been except in the pages of this novel. So I would love to know why that place means so much to you. I know it has to do with your parents, and why you made it the setting in Typewriter Beach.
Yeah, well, so I'll tell you the reason I made it the setting. Part of the reason I made it the setting was it was the pandemic. I couldn't say whether I traveled to write or write to travel. I think I love them both in equal measure. I love things like meeting Kristin Harmel on a bridge in Paris in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower.
That was actually pretty epic, really.
That was really fun. So I was holed up. My mom was sick from before the pandemic began, and so once the pandemic began, because they were very dependent on me, I had to be super careful not to get sick. And so I just didn't do anything. Mac and I walked along the shore every day. We found a place in Carmel. We spent a lot of time down here. We walked along the shore every day. And I couldn't get on a plane and go off to Paris to check about the things from that other book I was writing about. And Carmel was new to me. We literally had just moved down here not too long before I started this book. And so it was my way of coming to know my town, my second novel, The Wednesday Sisters, which was really my breakout novel. Many people think it was my first novel because my first novel sold so poorly. That was my getting to know Palo Alto, which was my home before. And I think it's a really wonderful way to get to know a place by setting a story there. And then Carmel is such an amazing place. I mean, people know it because, we have these great cottages that are like fairy tale cottages. And because, Brad Pitt just bought a house here and Clint Eastwood lived here and Doris Day lived here and Clint Eastwood still lives here and was our mayor at one point in time. There's all that kind of fame around it. It's the most beautiful place in the world. And I've been to a lot of places in the world. It's truly one of the most beautiful places in the world, but also has just a wonderful history. Its roots are in artists and writers coming down from San Francisco to find a quiet place to build like an artist colony. That's what it was. And you see these old pictures from Carmel, and it's women in 1920s dresses with their easels on the sand, painting right there on the sand. And we have, for a little town that's 3,000 people literally who live here, we have 2 theaters, and we have a world-class photography museum that was started by Ansel Adams, on top of, amazing hiking and sunsets and stars in the sky. And this home right on the shore that was the poet Robinson Jeffers built with his own hands out of stone. He built a cottage, which he had help with, and then he built this tower let me see if I got, let's see if it was that. Yeah, it looks
Oh, wow.
it's like that.
That looks like England. That looks like
exactly. Well, so it was made, he built the tower for his wife based on a tower that Yeats or something like that built. And so there's that whole rich literary history, and this just, I set Leo's cottage right across the street from that. So he doesn't have the ocean view. He doesn't have the money for an ocean view, but he has a view of that's called Hawk Tower. And then I started learning about Jefferson's poetry, which I didn't know about before. And it should be better known. It's very environmentally, it's very much about the environment and the importance of preserving it. And it's some beautiful, beautiful poetry. He was, during the 20s and 30s, Robert Frost, he was on that level of fame. And then he opposed the war and was the end of his popularity, I guess. But the history that goes along with that house, his personal life and everything, just wove through the book in a very nice way. And then, of course, there are some amazing mansions along the shore in Carmel, and so I wanted to be able to explore one of those mansions, but none of my characters, and none of the main characters that I started with could afford that. So I decided to put the video game maker across the street in one of those mansions so that I could explore that as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really felt like a little vacation to Carmel in the pages of the book. I feel like you took us there. So
well, and there's so many things. I'm going to tell you. You guys know this. Like, sometimes you have these little gifts. I use in the book. There's something called the Carmel Dog Bar along the water. There, it's a little stone hut with a bowl in it and a little faucet where people can stop and their dogs can drink water as they're walking along the shore. I'd like to say I made that up, but no, it's just there at one of those mansions that I would like to own on the waterfront. There is really a Carmel Dog Bar, so just fun stuff like that.
Well, you'll have to write the screenplay for this, Meg, and sell it as like a huge blockbuster movie, and then we'll all come visit you in your mansion on the.
Yeah, that would be great.
We're in Carmel. I'm putting it into the universe right now.
Yeah.
All right, Meg, if you would stick around, we have more to talk to you about, but first, a few quick reminders for our listeners and viewers out there.
So for everyone watching or just listening, we encourage you to rush out, and why wouldn't you, right now, and buy your copies of Typewriter Beach. And the perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. So you'll not only be getting it at a discount, but all of your purchases are there to support our show, our guests like Meg, and indie bookstores nationwide.
And of course, don't forget to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule, upcoming in-person events, and links to our merch store, our Substack newsletter sign-up, and the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa. Speaking of the book club, I will be their July guest. Join me at 7 p.m. Eastern on Monday, July 21st on their Facebook page as we discuss the stolen life of Colette Marceau.
And what's fun, if people don't know, on the book club page, they do spoilers. So it's a true book club. Like, we're interviewing Meg, and you haven't had a chance to read this extraordinary book. But on the book club page, they have read it. So you get to ask her questions like, why did you do?
Yep.
I won't say it out loud. So anyway, and I want to tell you a little bit more about our Substack. You can read all of our free weekly posts on the Substack website, substack.com, or app, or subscribe for free to get our newsletters directly in your inbox. There's so many ways to read it. And if you upgrade to our paid Substack, which costs just $5 a month, that's like one Starbucks a month. It's nothing. You will have access to deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests like Meg, plus monthly roundtable discussions like the recent one we just did with Meg and Ron, celebrating National Library Week. And we run all these amazing bonus Q&As with additional authors. Recently, we talked to Sarah Penner, Jill Santapalo. I just like saying her name, Jill Santapalo, and Susan Mallory. So if you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a huge way that you can support us for about $1 a week. And you can check all of that out at friendsandfiction.substack.com, or you can go to Substack and just put in our name and it'll populate.
We also wanted to tell you about this new partnership we have. So Friends and Fiction has recently partnered up with Talitha Coffee, which is a woman survivor-founded company based in California. Every time you buy Talitha Coffee, you help change lives through hiring, training, and comprehensive support for survivors of sex trafficking. So join us in making a difference one cup at a time. To mail order Talitha's ethically sourced, intentionally roasted coffee, visit www.talitha.com/friends and fiction. All right, now back to you, Meg. Can you give us any clue about what's up next for you? Because we enjoyed this book so much. And, we always say, it's like, someone coming into the delivery room after you've had a baby and saying, when's the next one due? Yeah. But we're asking, when's the next one due?
That's good. Well, I want to start out first by encouraging everybody who's still with us here to read Kristin and Patti's books. I got to read them both pre-publication, and I love reading things pre-pub, and they are both wonderful. So do that. I would love to tell you about what's next, but I will tell you a story, which is that after the Wednesday Sisters did so well, I started writing on contract, and my publisher would say, what do you want to write next? And every time she asked, I would say, well, I want to write this book about World War II women journalists in France, in the liberation of Paris. And I would tell people, I was on tour for the Wednesday Sisters, they would ask what was next, and I would say it was that book. And it was only after I stopped saying that was going to be my next book that it finally became my next book. And I had to move from Ballantine and a team I absolutely loved there to HarperCollins in order to get it published. So it became The Race for Paris, my fifth book, not my third book, not my fourth book, but finally my fifth book. So I have become very superstitious as a result of that. And I will say that I hope there's a book number 10. I have some ideas for things. I have some actual pages. It's possible it will be set in France. It's possible it will be set in Carmel by the Sea. It's possible it will be set someplace else entirely, or with some combination of all of those. But if I tell you what it's going to be next, then it won't be next, though. No.
I will jump on that superstition with you. I always do this. I'm like, okay, so it's about what? I can't tell. Forget it. All right. So we respect that, Natalie. All right, Meg, where can we catch up with you on the road and online? Tell us how to do that.
Oh, yeah. So I'm all over the place. I'm in Southern California coming up here. I'm back in Northern California. I'm in Connecticut and New Hampshire and Nashville, Tennessee, and all over the place, and for tours. So please come join me. I love connecting with readers in person. It's so rewarding, after you spend all this time writing a book, being actually able to meet your readers is so much fun. And then online, of course, I'm at megwaiteclayton.com, or you can reach me by just typing in typewriterbeach.com. I think that's all set up. And on Facebook, I'm novelist Meg, and every place else, Instagram and all those places you would meet people, I am at Meg Waite Clayton. So
that's awesome.
It's crazy. We always have to give the laundry list, right? I'm this on this platform and this on that platform.
Because we didn't realize it was going to have to be that way. Like every time you started a platform, Facebook, Instagram, Substack, and you didn't realize that you needed under one thing.
Yeah. And then all the free publicity these sites get by us saying you can find us there. It's kind of
Yes, it's such a good point. Exactly. All right. Well, Meg, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure. Can't even talk speaking with you. So thank you so much for being with us on the Friends in Fiction show.
Thank you so much for having me. Really just totally delightful. And I am in awe of what you all do.
Oh, sweet you. All right, everyone out there, be sure to tune in next week when Mary Kay and Ron will be joined by the indomitable Adriana Trigiani to discuss her new novel, The View from Lake Como. That show will air on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page, which is a tongue twister, and YouTube channel on Wednesday, July 16th at 7 p.m. And then, of course, it'll be on the podcast on Friday, July 18th.
Thank you to all of you out there for being with us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.